talk, this coming together of this group of people is different. It's got a different feel from meetings that I've been to before. And I'm truly, genuinely humbled to be here today with so many remarkable people from policy world, industry, and science, and of course the arts. All of us inevitably united by one desire to tackle AMR. Whilst my day job involves me working as a London-based trauma and orthopaedic surgeon, I must confess I somewhat accidentally have ended up having the huge privilege of founding the INEOS Oxford Institute within Oxford University. It's a long story, but I shall tell you later. Our mission, since we started in 2021, has been quite simple, just to combat AMR with using cutting-edge medicinal chemistry and microbiology. But probably as importantly, we serve as a multidisciplinary hub within Oxford, connecting scientists across Oxford and globally to try and stimulate innovation and a collaborative approach to AMR research. Possibly I'd like to think that we represent the doing end. We are AMR tech. We make stuff. Now, I'm often understandably asked, why do I care so much about AMR? And that's a really easy one to answer, because everything I do in my clinical practice is conditioned or is based on the foundation of effective antibiotics. The nature of my current practice may not have been even imaginable to Florey, Chain and Heatley, who, as we know, were based at the Duns School of Pathology in Oxford. They were using bedpans and milk churns, as you know, to culture penicillium mold for the early penicillin production. They took Fleming's stroke of utter genius and they translated it into the single greatest medical discovery of the 20th century. But all the technologically driven surgical advances, all cancer treatment, and indeed all the progress required to make modern medicine has been dependent on one thing alone: our ability to prevent and to treat infection. Without effective antibiotics, even the simplest surgery, as we know, becomes high risk, as does all chemotherapy, as previous speakers have mentioned. I feel, though, that I have a rather unique perspective, as I am a third generation surgeon, the last in a line of surgeons whose careers run from 1925 to the current time. This is a picture I found last week of my grandfather in 1925 as a junior surgeon at Guy's Hospital. He practiced in a surgical world before and after the creation of the NHS, where antibiotics did not exist in his early career, where even in leading hospitals such as his, the mortality rate from major planned elective abdominal surgery ran between 20 and 40%. This is compared to well below 1% these days. A wound infection, a post-operative pneumonia, a urinary tract infection was often fatal. My father was appointed a consultant orthopaedic surgeon in the early 1960s, actually a stone's throw from here, and was then called the Middlesex Hospital. He was a quiet and modest man. Sadly, these qualities skipped a generation, as is obvious. He rose to become one of the leading surgeons of his generation, and ultimately he became the president of the Royal College of Surgeons. But he was not proudest of that. He made his own very significant clinical contribution to orthopaedic surgery with the pioneering treatment of adolescent primary malignant bone cancer. He pioneered the use of limb-sparing surgery using massive metal implants, and these operations were only possible because of antibiotic prophylaxis and a better understanding of how to use antibiotics. Prior to this, many of these teenagers had required hideous hindquarter amputations, including the buttock and part of the pelvis. This was obviously grossly deforming, it was incapacitating, and it was psychologically traumatic in a group who often did not survive. In my current orthopaedic practice, unrecognizable no doubt to my grandfather, I routinely undertake complex robotic joint replacement, again, only possible because of improved antibiotic cover. Let me tell you, once a joint replacement is infected, it is very difficult, if not sometimes impossible, to actually treat. So perhaps it's tempting for all of us to think of our own experience of the great discoveries of our lifetimes. The only way is ever forward, but never backwards. Onwards and upwards, bigger and better. That's the mantra. In the 20th century and the first quarter of this century, we have always seen an explosion in inventions. From the car, the aeroplane, the jet engine, the television, the radio. In medicine, think about the imaging we now have. X-rays, CT scans, MRI scans. We now understand the structure of DNA. We've discovered insulin. And even in our children's lifetime, we had the advent of personal computers and, of course, the smartphone and the internet. These are just a few. And all of them, understandably, are now taken for granted. That's what we do as humans. We move on. But as we've heard, antibiotics, unlike so many, if not all, of those other gifts to humanity, are not a given. Their diminishing effectiveness is absolutely guaranteed. Can you imagine the public reaction if it became clear that the internet was just getting a little bit less effective every day, every week, every month, every year? Can you really think that the public would tolerate this? Do you not think the pressure on politicians would be unbearable? It would be the single issue that they had to sort out. So, as we've heard, antibiotics, unlike so many of these gifts, are not a given. Oops, what's happening here? We will be returning to a medical world that is more familiar, sadly, to my grandfather and to my father. This is chilling, it's true. It's not scaremongering, it is just as we've heard, an inevitable consequence of the Darwinian evolution of bacteria getting used to whatever we throw at them. You slide. It was not... Oh, it's not interesting. Oh. It wasn't that long ago that the whole world watched the evening news about COVID. The virus seemed to evolve almost weekly. The public got to understand the principle of protein spikes. They started talking about it in pubs. If they can understand this, they must be made to understand this similar pandemic, this looming or silent pandemic. It's been encouraging today to see all the extraordinary scientific innovations underway, from new antibiotics to AI-driven prediction tools and the next generation of diagnostics and global surveillance. But the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, that innovation alone is not enough. Scientific innovation cannot be translated to real-world solutions without the collaboration between industry, policymakers, and the media. We also need the right financial models, we heard from Glaxo, to create incentives from pharmaceutical companies to come up with these breakthroughs. Without these changes, the sums just don't add up. They're not charities. Rebuilding a viable market for antibiotic and vaccines and diagnostics requires true public-private partnership, as it did at the tail end of the Second World War. And importantly, we need to start making AMR visible and relatable to the collective public consciousness, using the artistic creativity that we saw earlier, to turn scientific urgency into emotional resonance. The parallels with climate change are obvious, and indeed, as we heard, are interconnected. As we heard, the arts and media can move hearts, whereas data alone cannot do that. So much like bacteria, I fear that we too have become immune. We've become immune to worrying about yet another potential existential crisis. What, I ask, will it take to bring this reality home? 80 years ago, the discovery of penicillin showed what is possible when science, government and industry work together. It was a story of urgency, a story of ingenuity and collaboration, and it changed the course of medicine. As we face, all of us, antimicrobial resistance today, we can learn from that history. The challenge is different, but the lessons are the same. Antimicrobial resistance is a grand challenge. It cannot be solved by one person, one sector, or one country alone. INEOS is a chemical company by origin, not one you traditionally expect to lead in global health. Yet, it stepped decisively into the AMR void about 5 years ago, leading to the establishment of the INEOS Oxford Institute for AMR Research in 2021 with a £100 million gift. We have already, at the IOI, completely created a novel class of antibiotic candidate molecules that are ready to go into phase 1 clinical trials. This simply would not have happened without this foresight and investment. To me, this represents proof that when industry applies its resources and its organisational expertise beyond its traditional boundaries, it can catalyse real change. As we leave today, let us remember, therefore, that this is not just about preserving antibiotics. It's about preserving the future of the whole of modern medicine itself. The next 80 years can either be marked by resistance and loss, or by renewal and collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, let us choose the latter.